Uncle Watti's Whiskers. The clever squirrel who saved the forest. In the heart of Willowbrook Forest, there lived a squirrel named Watti, whose whiskers were so long and distinctive that everyone called him Uncle Watti, even though he wasn't actually anyone's uncle. He had earned the title through years of kindness, wisdom, and an uncanny ability to sense when trouble was brewing. His whiskers, silvered with age and perpetually twitching, seemed to have a mind of their own. But lately, Uncle Watti had been keeping to himself. His hollow in the ancient oak had become a refuge from the younger animals who no longer sought his advice. The forest had changed, and so had its inhabitants. They were faster, busier, more concerned with gathering and hoarding than with the old ways of community and caution. Uncle Watti didn't blame them. Times were different now, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, a premonition that tickled his whiskers every morning when he emerged to watch the sunrise. One crisp autumn morning, that feeling became impossible to ignore. He was perched on his favorite branch, nibbling on an acorn, when he noticed something strange in the distance. A thin column of smoke rose from the eastern edge of the forest, near the old logging road that hadn't been used in years. His whiskers bristled. "That's not a campfire," he muttered to himself, his dark eyes narrowing. "That's something else entirely." Without finishing his breakfast, Uncle Watti scampered down the trunk and headed toward the smoke. His old legs weren't as quick as they used to be, but what he lacked in speed, he made up for in determination. As he approached the eastern boundary, he encountered Bramble, a young hedgehog known for his skepticism and sharp tongue. "Uncle Watti," Bramble called out, rolling to a stop in his path, "where are you rushing off to? You'll throw out your back at that pace." "The smoke," Watti said, gesturing with his tail. "Have you seen it?" Bramble glanced toward the horizon and shrugged. "Probably just some humans having a bonfire. Nothing to worry about." "It's not nothing," Watti insisted, his whiskers twitching furiously. "I've lived in this forest for 15 seasons, Bramble. I know the difference between a controlled fire and something dangerous." Bramble sighed, clearly unconvinced. "Look, Uncle Watti, I respect you, I really do. But you've been seeing danger around every corner lately. Remember last month when you thought the river was poisoned? It was just algae." Watti felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment. That had been a mistake, one he'd been reminded of more times than he cared to count. "This is different," he said quietly. "I can feel it." Bramble softened slightly, his quills relaxing. "Fine, I'll come with you to check it out. But when it turns out to be nothing, you're buying me dinner." The two unlikely companions made their way through the underbrush, the smell of smoke growing stronger with each passing minute. When they finally reached the clearing near the old logging road, they both stopped cold. It wasn't a campfire, it was a construction site. Massive machines sat idle in the clearing, their metal bodies gleaming in the morning light. Piles of lumber were stacked nearby, and survey markers dotted the ground in neat rows. But most alarming of all was the source of the smoke, a burning pile of brush and debris that had been cleared from the land. "What is this?" Bramble whispered, his voice trembling. Uncle Watti's heart sank. "Development," he said grimly. "They're going to build here." "But they can't," Bramble protested. "This is our forest. This is protected land." Watti shook his head slowly. "Protected doesn't always mean safe. Not when there's money involved." They stood in silence, watching the smoke curl into the sky. Finally, Bramble spoke. "What do we do?" Uncle Watti's whiskers stopped twitching. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of clarity. "We fight," he said, "but not with teeth and claws. We fight with something they won't expect. We fight with strategy." Back in the heart of the forest, Uncle Watti called a meeting at the great stump, an ancient tree that had fallen decades ago and now served as the gathering place for important discussions. Word spread quickly, and by midday, animals of all kinds had assembled. Foxes, badgers, rabbits, deer, owls, and more. Watti climbed to the top of the stump, his small frame silhouetted against the afternoon sun. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying across the crowd. "I know many of you think I'm just a paranoid old squirrel who's past his prime. And maybe you're right. But what I saw this morning is real, and it threatens everything we know." He described the construction site in detail, the machines, the lumber, the burning brush. As he spoke, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some animals looked frightened, others looked angry, a few seemed skeptical. "What do you expect us to do?" called out a gruff voice from the back. It was Magnus, a large badger with a reputation for pragmatism. We can't exactly march up to the humans and ask them to leave. No, Watti agreed, but we can make it impossible for them to stay. The crowd fell silent, waiting. The humans are building because they think this forest is empty, Watti continued. They don't see us. They don't understand what they're destroying. But what if we made them see? What if we showed them that this forest is alive, that it matters? How? Asked Fern, a gentle doe who rarely spoke at gatherings. Watti smiled, his whiskers twitching with excitement. We become impossible to ignore. Over the next several days, Uncle Watti organized the most ambitious plan the forest had ever seen. He divided the animals into groups, each with a specific task. The birds were sent to survey the construction site from above, reporting on the workers' schedules and movements. The rabbits and mice, with their ability to squeeze into tight spaces, were tasked with gathering information. Blueprints left unattended, conversations overheard through open windows. Meanwhile, the larger animals prepared for what Watti called Operation Visibility. The idea was simple but bold. Make the humans aware of just how many creatures called this forest home. We're not going to attack them, Watti explained during one of their planning sessions. Violence will only give them an excuse to escalate. Instead, we're going to be present. Everywhere they look, they'll see us. Every time they try to work, we'll be watching. We'll make them uncomfortable, make them question whether this is worth the trouble. Bramble, who had become one of Watti's most dedicated supporters, raised a concern. What if it doesn't work? What if they just push through anyway? Watti nodded slowly. Then we move to Phase 2. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. The first day of Operation Visibility was a sight to behold. When the construction workers arrived at the site, they were greeted by an audience. Deer stood at the edge of the clearing, watching silently. Owls perched in the trees overhead, their large eyes unblinking. Squirrels lined every branch, their tails flicking in unison. The workers exchanged uneasy glances. "What the hell?" one of them muttered, staring at the assembled animals. "Just ignore them," another said, though his voice lacked conviction. "They'll scatter once we start the machines." But when the machines roared to life, the animals didn't scatter. They simply watched, their presence unwavering. The workers tried to focus on their tasks, but there was something deeply unsettling about being observed so intently by hundreds of eyes. By noon, the foreman called for an early break. "This is weird," he admitted to his crew. "I've never seen anything like it." The pattern continued for days. Every morning, the animals assembled. Every day, the workers grew more uncomfortable. Production slowed to a crawl as the men found excuses to avoid certain areas where the animal presence was strongest. But it wasn't enough. Uncle Watti knew they needed something more. "Phase 2, he announced at the evening gathering. "We need to reach the humans who aren't here, the ones making the decisions. And to do that, we need help from outside the forest." His plan was audacious. Using the information gathered by the rabbits and mice, Watti had learned that a group of human environmental activists had been trying to stop the development for months. Their efforts had been unsuccessful, but Watti believed that with the right evidence, they could turn the tide. "The birds will carry messages," he explained. "Feathers, leaves, anything that shows the humans what's being destroyed. We'll drop them at the activists' meeting places, lead them back here. They need to see this with their own eyes." It was risky. It required trust in creatures they had never met. But it was their best chance. The plan worked better than anyone could have hoped. Within a week, the activists arrived with cameras and notebooks. They documented everything: the wildlife, the ancient trees, the delicate ecosystem that had thrived here for centuries. They filmed the animals, capturing moments that would soon go viral on the internet. The construction company faced a public relations nightmare. Images of deer watching workers with sad eyes, of squirrels gathered in protest, of owls silently judging from the branches. These pictures touched something deep in people's hearts. Petitions circulated, news stations ran stories. Politicians, sensing the shifting winds, began to ask questions. 3 weeks after Operation Visibility began, the construction company announced they were halting the project pending further environmental review. A month after that, the land was officially designated as a protected wildlife sanctuary. The celebration at the Great Stump lasted all night. Animals who had never spoken to each other before shared food and stories. Old rivalries were forgotten in the joy of their shared victory. Uncle Watti sat apart from the festivities, watching from his favorite branch in the ancient oak. His whiskers, finally still, rested against his graying fur. Bramble climbed up to join him. "You did it," the hedgehog said, admiration clear in his voice. "You actually saved the forest." Watti shook his head. "We did it, all of us together. I just helped everyone remember what they were capable of." Bramble was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry I doubted you," he said finally. "About the smoke, about everything. You saw what no one else could see." Watti smiled, his eyes crinkling. "These old whiskers are good for something after all." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the celebration below. The forest, their home, was safe, and Uncle Watti, the clever squirrel who had spent so long feeling forgotten, had found his purpose once again. As the moon rose over Willowbrook Forest, casting silver light through the branches, Uncle Watti closed his eyes and felt, for the first time in a very long time, completely at peace. His whiskers twitched once, twice, and then settled. The forest was alive, and it would stay that way.